Welcome to part 2 of this week's TERF Talk Down Under. We have joining us Jenny Kyng from Hobart, Tassie.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Great. Now, you have recently started a new Facebook page, Active Watchful Waiting Australia. Can you tell us a bit about it and how it's going?
Sure. So it's meant to be a sort of professional network to gather health professionals, allied health professionals, but also to attract anyone who's interested. But basically, we're trying to attract health professionals who are very concerned about the current state of what they call gender affirming care in Australia for minors in particular. We're focusing on minors, and we're hoping to work towards pressing for a parliamentary inquiry into what's happening, because it's, we believe, a developing medical scandal. And
it absolutely
on the level of the lobotomy scandal and other medical scandals throughout history. And
it absolutely is, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's shocking.
It is absolutely shocking to anyone who hasn't been completely befuddled by gender identity ideology. It's horrifying. It's just horrifying what we're doing to children. And I'm a registered nurse and a counsellor and a psychotherapist myself, and I've worked with a lot of young people, and I've had like over 30 years experience. So if the mob want to come and try and destroy my career, that's fine, because I want to retire soon. So go right ahead, guys. Feel free. But yeah, I've worked with a lot of young people, and I've seen how susceptible and fragile young people are and what they go through. And I just think it's absolutely shocking that we are now facilitating self-harm on a grand scale.
Yeah.
I just find it incredible and hard to believe. And it's horrifying that so many health professionals do go along with it. But I know there are many out there who are as horrified as I am, but they're too afraid to say anything.
Mm-hmm. It's the case everywhere, isn't it? So many people afraid to speak out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally understand that, because people don't want to lose their registration. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want their reputation dragged through the mud, and they're very scared of that word transphobic. It's like, you know, something, it's like a kind of hand grenade that trans activists throw into the conversation to stun people and intimidate them and silence them. And it works really well.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's unpleasant being told you're a bigot, you know, like it does. It stuns you and puts you off guard. It's like, oh, I have to defend myself instead of just speak my mind.
Exactly. It does. It does put you off guard, and it makes you, it sort of makes it hard to gather your thoughts and think rationally, because you sort of, oh, I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked. Maybe I am a terrible person for thinking that we shouldn't be, you know, performing radical body modification on small children. You know, like puberty blockers, for instance, that's, you know, medical derangement on children as young as, I don't know how young they start, but they're trying to prevent puberty, so that presumably they're starting as young as 10, maybe even 9, and it's just going to get younger and younger, you know. As the activists have more and more power, they're going to argue for earlier and earlier beginning of treatment, because why would you want to torture children by forcing them to live as the sex they actually are? Because that's cruel.
Oh, it's so upside down, so backwards.
Some woman in America was lecturing people, saying that kids can self-identify as transgender at 18 months.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. Yeah, apparently if they point, if it's a boy and it points to something pink, like, you know, little finger, then it's indicating that its gender identity is female. I mean, these people are just delusional. They're clinically delusional. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do with the word delusional. If we're supposed to believe that what they're saying is accurate, then the word delusion has no meaning anymore.
Yeah, it's a mass delusion.
It's a mass delusion. It's a mass hysteria.
Yeah.
We've had it before. It's similar to the satanic panic back in the 80s, when everyone thought kids in childcare centres were being sexually abused and subjected to satanic rituals, and then it all turned out to be complete rubbish. But people believed it, and they were even able to convince the children that it had happened, and they were even able to convince people who worked in them that they too had engaged in horrendous acts when in fact there was no evidence. So human beings are very irrational creatures. We have to understand that you can convince people of almost anything, and history shows you that. Like, we can see that throughout history.
Wow. I never looked into the satanic panic, but that's really interesting. I might have to watch some YouTube on that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. So what happened was a lot of psychologists coached these children into saying what they wanted to hear. So they'd be saying things like, are you sure that Mr. Smith didn't touch you? Maybe he touched you on your bottom. Do you think this is a picture of a bottom and that's a finger? He might have done that. Can you remember him doing that? And they just went on and on like that until the children would say, yes, oh yes, that did happen.
Yeah, wow.
This is what happens with children. They will say what they think you want to hear, and they assume your reality is superior to theirs because that's what children do. They rely on adults to provide a sense of reality. So if your adults are delusional and they're saying things like, yes, you got touched, didn't you? He put his penis, in your vagina, didn't he? And you keep saying no. Well, eventually you're going to say, yes, he did, as a child. And it's the same with what teachers are doing now, where they say, you might be a boy to girls, or you might be a girl. How do you know you're really a boy? How do you know? Because you like pink, so you might be a girl. This is coaching.
I don't know if you watched the one that just came out the other day, Skirt Go Spinny, is a YouTube channel. She's put together all this footage from TikTok and all sorts of news stuff from the USA. But I said it last week, but I got to say it again because it's just, I can't get over this. This poor little girl, she's been subjected to all this gender identity nonsense at school or at preschool. I can't remember which. And she comes home in tears, crying, terrified that she's going to turn into a boy.
Oh, I did hear about that. Yeah, of course, because you're shaking that child's sense of reality. And children are very subject to fantasies and terrifying fantasies anyway. Like, we all were terrified of someone under the bed or someone in the wardrobe. Or I remember I was terrified a gorilla might break through the window because I'd seen King Kong or something like that, or Murders in the Rue Morgue, that's right. I mean, children are already very susceptible to fears and not being able to differentiate fantasy from reality. So then if you shake what reality they do have, you're doing a profound disservice to them. You're disorienting them and you're destroying their actual identity. Which is what queer theory wants to do, actually. It wants to destroy people's sense of identity.
Yeah. And kids pick up on those subliminal things too, like, mum said, oh, I always wanted a boy, or favoritism towards the child of the other sex. So you think, well, maybe if I, all that stuff, they pick up on that as well. And that can be manipulated by parents and others.
Very much so, yeah. And I was listening to Irreversible Damage on audiobook by Abigail Schreier, and I think it was Ken Zucker, the gender dysphoria expert, whose career was ruined through the conversion therapy bills because the activists unfairly said he was using conversion therapy when he never was. But he talked about a boy he looked after whose mother had always wanted a girl. And when he was born, she treated him very, very badly. And I think at one point she abandoned him, and he decided unconsciously, because it's usually not conscious, but unconsciously figured that if I can be a girl, mum will love me. She'll stay. She won't leave me. I mean, we know this about human beings. We have this unconscious that we act on. And it's also like that with anorexics, because I worked with eating disorder patients for 5 years. That if the mother has spent a lot of time looking in the mirror and going, oh, I'm so disgusting, I'm fat, look at all this fat, this is gross, and grabbing her stomach, and she transfers that to the child. And very often, I'm not blaming the parents necessarily, but that obsession with body fat gets transferred to the child, and they then become, anorexic, or they have bulimia or some other eating disorder. I mean, children are highly susceptible to influence from adults. Why is this a surprise? But the activists for transition of children keep saying, oh, no, children can make up their own minds. They have logical reasoning, at a very early age, they have logical reasoning and they know who they are. Like
my friend whose daughter transitioned, she has 3 daughters. And when her daughter became her son, she was overjoyed because she'd always wanted a boy. And she keeps saying that. And she says the word son like 50,000 times. It's like she's trying to convince herself that it's actually true.
Yeah.
So yeah, now she has 2 daughters and a son, which is what she wanted.
That's horrifying. Yeah.
It is.
Sure, that's
Yes.
not unusual that the parents want a child of the opposite sex, or they don't want a gay child. They'd
Well,
rather.
the daughter came out as a lesbian first, and now she's a boy.
Oh, well, there you go.
Short, overweight, hairy,
Okay.
good looking. You know, it's just very, very sad.
Oh, wow. That's
Well,
horrifying. Yeah.
it
They
is.
transfer that unconscious, desire to the child, and the
Yeah,
child.
definitely.
How can I be loved by mum and dad? Because that's the most important thing to any child. How can I maintain their love? Because without it, I won't survive. I'll literally die. That's the way a child thinks.
These parents were genuinely like shocked and didn't know how to deal with it when their kid came and said, "Hey, I'm trans," because they found it on the internet. And they did take her to a gender clinic, and of course from then on it was affirmation only, and of course, because they had no experience of it or understanding of it, it was all just fitted in perfectly.
Well, this is, as Bernard Lane, the journalist, says, once you take the child to a gender clinic, that's the end of it, because
it is.
And that's what the conversion therapy bill is all about, enforcing the affirmation only model on all clinicians, therapists, counselors, doctors, which is terrible. It's an abandonment of your duty of care.
Yeah.
And of the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. I mean, we don't affirm anybody. You don't do that as a therapist.
3 GPs have told me they now refer at the first visit because of the conversion thing.
Oh my God.
So a child and parent will come to a GP and they say, "Look, I don't have expertise in this," and they refer them on to a gender specialist.
Right. And it's, because they're terrified of losing their registration or of having trans activists picketing outside their surgery. And I heard from a psychiatrist that most psychiatrists don't want to touch gender identity disordered or dysphoric teenagers because it's just too much of a hot potato. Nobody wants to lose their registration and nobody wants to have their reputation destroyed. So they will just pass them on. No. I don't think so,
That's terrible. So that I'm guessing that would mean that then they only end up seeing activist psychiatrists, or they end up seeing like counselors that maybe don't have the same level of, I don't know. Expertise. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, they'll see people who believe in affirmation, basically. So it doesn't matter what level of expertise. If you're practicing affirmation, your expertise is quite irrelevant, because there's nothing about training as a counselor, psychotherapist, or any other kind of mental health expert that tells you that you should be affirming people ever. That's not what you do. I mean, I'm not saying you would tell someone who's gay that they're not gay. That's different. That's completely different to gender identity. Mm-hmm. But someone who says there's something that they're clearly not. I mean, someone who says they're gay, they're saying what they are. This is something they are. Someone who says they're the opposite sex is saying they're different to what they are. And as Abigail Schreier points out, you wouldn't say, if you had a black girl come to you, an African-American girl, for instance, saying, "Oh, I'm really white. I'm really a white girl. Please call me Heather. I like white boys. And I've watched white girls on YouTube and they're just so cute and they're so, they're so cool. And I don't like black things, I like to play hockey and I want to have my hair straightened. I want to have my skin whitened." And, if the therapist said, "Oh, of course, you're really white. You're really white. You're not really black." Well, everyone would consider that an absolute dereliction of duty.
Mm-hmm. Even species dysphoria. Have you heard?
I haven't heard that term, but I can imagine it's those people who think they're animals, right? Yeah. Well, you're opening the door for anything. Once you say that you create your own reality, you're opening the door for any level of madness. Mm-hmm. That's the trouble. It's completely irrational.
And now Tasmania is, it looks like you're going to be bringing in similar legislation to what we've got here in Victoria, which is going to ban any sort of gay conversion therapy, but also gender identity conversion therapy.
That's right.
What's that looking like?
It's looking really bad. I've heard it's even worse than the Victorian legislation, though I don't know the actual fine points of that because I haven't read the whole document. But it's really bad because basically it will be misused to condemn any kind of psychotherapy that explores people's issues. So it's going to destroy the whole kind of approach of do psychotherapy first, do no harm. It's just going to destroy that, because if they could destroy Ken Zucker, the Canadian gender dysphoria expert who had such a great success rate in terms of preventing people from going on to body modification that they didn't need, they destroyed his career. 80%, 70 or 80% of his patients came to accept their own sex and live happy lives. They destroyed his career because they called it conversion therapy, because he was just doing exploratory psychotherapy. And I've got a great quote actually from Sinead Watson, the detransitioner, who's got a fantastic YouTube video. You guys have probably seen it, called Ramblings of a Detransition Woman.
Yep.
She said, "I can't believe I was allowed to do this at a time when I was incredibly vulnerable, because I was hauling around a mountain of baggage that wasn't discussed, because God forbid we engage in exploratory psychotherapy, because that's conversion therapy."
Heartbreaking.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never met a trans person who, by their own admission, hasn't had additional issues. They're the first ones to tell you, I've got this and this and this and this, as well as I'm trans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very, very common. The rate of additional mental health issues or life events, trauma, adverse childhood experiences is extremely high. It's like 70%, 80%.
Well, that's the cause of most dysphoria is trauma.
Yeah, that's right.
Dissociation, trauma.
Of course. That's right. Good point. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Yep. Or they're gay, internalized homophobia. And then, to think they're going to school and they're being told that they're in the wrong body because they're non-gender conforming. In other words, they're probably gay. I mean, that's just criminal.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's gonna, in over the coming years, it's going to be like this whole new field of psychology opens up, which will be like how to help detransitioners.
Yeah, I hope it does. I really do, because I understand there's something like 29,000 on Reddit. So no one's collecting statistics, conveniently enough. The gender clinics don't collect statistics on detransitioners because they don't want to know about them. And if they go back to the gender clinic, they get told basically, go away, we don't want to know. Or, well, you were never really trans, or you're non-binary, or, it's just so cult-like, really. So nobody's counting all the detransitioners.
There was even there was a guy in the UK who wanted to do his doctoral thesis on detransitioners, and the university prevented him from doing that.
I can believe it. Absolutely. That's the environment. It's so hostile to any genuine science or evidence that, the activists have really managed to sew the whole thing up so that no one can dissent or explore or ask questions. And if you do, then, well, like that Scandinavian woman I heard about who's facing 3 years jail, as well as some of her comrades, for saying that men cannot be women. And under hate crime laws, they're now facing 3 years jail.
I saw that headline just today.
Yeah.
Oh.
So a climate of fear where people can't speak and can't ask questions, no free speech. It's very sort of like McCarthyism. Yeah. Where silenced.
To me, it's proof that there's vested interests. There must, that it's not just as simple as a social justice movement and be nice. It is absolute proof that there's vested financial interests in this. Absolutely. Because the level of no platforming and punishment is so severe.
You said McCarthyism.
Yeah.
And I use that frequently to describe what's going on.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to the Tasmanian Law Reform Institute and the report they've just put out, advising this ban on gender identity conversion therapy, in there is this this section about clinicians that object to transing children on the grounds of, like, there were some weird grounds, like
objection or something.
What was that?
Did they use the term conscientious objection or anything like that?
I don't think they did. It was like religious grounds was one reason, and something else and something else. But like to ethically or conscientiously object, I don't know if it used that term, but
Right.
If they object, they have to report themselves to the government. They go on this like blacklist of, like, this is McCarthyism in practice.
It is absolutely, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's just horrifying. I have heard of that, and it's horrifying. I mean, what will happen to those people?
Yeah.
And will that list be publicly available?
Mm.
Will they be punished by their professional bodies? Will they be subjected to re-education, perhaps? And will they, hey?
Doxing.
Doxing, exactly. I mean, I can see how easy that would be. And will they be, yeah, if they're doxed, you can imagine trans activists outside your house screaming, yelling, breaking things, threatening to rape you, threatening to kill you, all the things we see happening to heretics around the world who say anything that goes against gender identity ideology.
Oh, it's such a strange time to be alive. Like, you know, you think about the Salem witch trials, it's like, oh my God, we're sort of in the middle of it all over again.
Oh, we really are. The level of irrationality and mass hysteria is so high. And one thing they've done too is sort of weaponize women's empathy against women themselves and against any gender critical women. So I've found having discussions on Facebook where I've tried to be extremely reasonable, extremely polite, phrase things in a way where I'm just asking questions. And by the end of it, people are saying, you should be damned to hell. I hope your soul rots. And I hope you wake up and realize the shame you should be feeling. Like all these people, some of whom I actually knew, but they didn't know that I knew them. It just turned into these people who would like to build a pyre and burn me alive. You know, that's the level of it's a mass hysteria. And women particularly are susceptible to this, feel sorry for these people because they're victims. And the victim narrative is so, it's so constantly constructed. And no decent rights group does so on the basis of victimhood. If you think about any rights group, they did it on the basis of strength, not victimhood.
And the suicide myth, and you know how many trans people we've all killed.
Oh, exactly.
I must have a massive death count by now.
I know, it's
crazy.
Whole idea that there's like a Holocaust, and I've heard that word used. There's a Holocaust of trans people being killed in the streets, and I've had discussions with people like, well, where's it happening? And they'll bring up statistics that in Brazil, trans prostitutes are being murdered. And I'm like, well, what's the general rate of prostitutes being murdered in Brazil? Oh, well, we don't go there. No, we won't talk about that. And it's like, no, these statistics, like you said, there's vested interest behind it, and they've got a whole marketing campaign figured out, and they've got a lot of control over politicians, and they've been doing it for 20, 30, God knows how long, and they've been so successful. So we're really up against it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful to Catherine Deeves because she's introduced it into the general public's awareness now. Because most people didn't really understand until all this hoopla about Kath and Save Women's Sports. So, you know, I'm really indebted to her that people are now at least curious about what's happening and don't consider us completely, you know, like, of course, TERFs are still demonized, but they're sort of like, well, why? You know, why? Why are these people so bad?
That's right. It has brought it out into public attention, and we need to sort of have some public education about what's really happening. I mean, for instance, I tried looking recently on Google, and we know that Google is a very heavily socially engineered function, or whatever the right word is for it. I looked up mastectomies, trans, teenagers. Everything I saw was actually not a teenager, it was an adult. They managed to look totally male, you know, they're all buffed up, hardly any scars, or, you know, the scars almost look aesthetically pleasing. No children. And yet I know from some of the pages that are gender critical woman run that this is happening to 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And the pictures, the real pictures, are just horrific.
Yeah.
So what do we call that? If you take healthy breast tissue off a child, what do we call that? What's the right word for it?
Mutilation.
Yeah. And it's like people are so frightened of that word. That word is so triggering. What about the actuality of what's happening? And why is that not triggering? Because people don't, to a certain extent, a lot of people don't want to know.
I sort of started work on a piece. I don't know if I'll finish it, but pointing out that it's like the most successful psyop, psychological operation against the public that I've ever seen in my whole life.
You're absolutely right. That would be a great piece. You should really finish that. That would be brilliant. That is so true.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have people championing the mutilation of children, championing an extreme male sexual fetish, and then condemning anyone so vociferously, if is that right?
That's the right word. Absolutely.
It's insane. It's so upside down.
It is. It really is. You know, if you said this was going to happen to anyone 30 years ago, they would have just said, you are insane. There's no way that would ever happen. You know, we're moving forward to a great world where women are liberated and, you know, children have freedom. And look at where we got to. Like, how did this ever happen? And we know it happened because of vested interests, planning, plotting. I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but any activist group that wants something will plan it to the nth degree, and that's what's happened. And because there are billions of dollars behind it, they've been incredibly successful. But yeah, it is an amazing psyops maneuver, and that's why they want to start with children from kindergarten onwards too, so the generation coming up are completely indoctrinated. It works brilliantly.
What do you think will happen long term, Jenny? Let's try and finish on a positive note.
I think there's going to be a massive backlash. I think there already is, and we can see it in the US already. And I think it's going to come from parents. We need parents to be outraged, enraged, not just outraged, but enraged and willing to take action. And I think it's becoming really clear what's happening. And parents, they've got skin in the game. It's their kids. They don't want this happening to their children. So I think it is going to all fall apart, but it's probably going to take 10 or 20 years. Another thing that's going to bring it down is lawsuits. That's what's going to bring it down. When that happened too, apparently with the multiple personality disorder, mass hysteria, that people started suing their therapists for convincing them that they had multiple personality disorder. So lawsuits are a great way to demolish this kind of mass delusion. Because once people are paying up, once the government's paying up for their gender clinics, ruining children's lives, they start to go, oh, maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all.
Yeah. Their director should be in jail. She should be locked up as far as I'm concerned.
Who's that?
Their director of the Royal Children's Hospital.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone who says, I know I'm doing the right thing, who claims to be a scientist, is someone we need to be very, very concerned about, because you should never assume you're doing the right thing. You should always be skeptical about that. So that sort of fanaticism is very alarming. And that self-righteousness, that's not good. And I've read recently that she's even said, or at least the Melbourne Children's Hospital's guidelines say that even if a child or adolescent is psychotic, that doesn't disqualify them from having transition surgery.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
What does disqualify them? Is there anything that would disqualify people?
No.
That is so negligent. And I think Ray Blanchard and someone else did a paper outlining the different types of gender dysphoria. And one of them that they mentioned, and they said there wasn't a lot of research on it, but was like psychosis-induced gender dysphoria. So you're having a psychosis where you think that you're the opposite sex, or you're meant to be the opposite sex.
Yeah, I've seen that happen, actually. I've seen that happen in someone who came off heroin. He was a heroin addict. And heroin apparently is a really good antipsychotic. I don't recommend it to anyone on that basis, but apparently it does help to suppress psychosis. And when he came off it, he became quite psychotic, and he started to believe he was a woman in the midst of his psychosis.
There you go.
Nowadays, they'd say he's being his authentic self.
Oh, my God.
No, I think it's going to come down. It's all going to come crashing down.
It will. It has to, because it's just too crazy to continue. But I hope it's not 20 years. I'm hoping for 8 years now.
8 would be good. I think with the more and more detransitioners we have getting on YouTube and eventually having lawsuits, the faster it's going to come down, and the more and more parents protesting.
Yeah.
So here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping.
Be positive.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for joining us, Jenny. Really appreciate your time.
Lovely to be here with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all our subscribers. Please like and share. And if you're a journalist, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with Jenny. You can write a story about this.
That would be good. I'm available.
All right. See you next time, everyone.
All right. See you guys.